We'll now look at the sugya of Adamu Le'olam, the idea that a person who causes damage is responsible even without intent. He's always responsible for his actions. And on Daf Chavav, Amud Aleph, Amud Bet, we learn that from Petza Tachad Petza that Tsar is chayav b'makom nezek, which means that in a situation when a person is paying damages for damaging another person, he'd also pay for the physical pain that the person experienced, the tsar in the case of nezek. So Tosfot makes an important point, which is that not only is it that tsar is paid on top of nezek, but ripoy, shevet, uboshet, kulu mitzar yalfinan. The other three elements of damages, which is medical expenses, time off from work, and shame, are all also chayav on top of nezek. And they're not just paid in a case when there is no nezek, but they're paid on top of nezek. And kulu mitzar yalfinan. And all of them are chayav on top of nezek because they're derived from tsar. That tsar is considered to be an example, and the obligation that we learn from petza tachad patza to pay tsar b'makom nezek is a source that the same thing is true for ripoy, shevet, uboshet. That they're all chayav b'makom nezek k'demashma b'achovel, and Tosfot's proof text is Perek Achovel, Pehei, Da'amar mina Tana v'kulon chayavim b'tashlumin b'makom nezek. The Gemara says that they're all chayav on top of nezek. Minahan imili. What's the source? Amar Rav Zvid b'shmei de Rava. Amar Kra petza tachad patza, etc. So mashma the kulu yalfinan mitzar. That the Gemara seems to say that they're all obligated to pay on top of nezek based on tsar, based on petza tachad patza, presumably a binyan av that extends the teaching to all of them. In the next Tosfot, Shema Min Atarti, we see in the Gemara that we learn two halachot from Petza Tachad Patza. One is that Tsar is paid on top of Nezek, and the second is that damages are paid even ba'ones. L'chayv al ashogeg kimezid v'la'ones kiratzon. So Tosfot asks a simple question, that le'el amrinan sima eno shel chaveru b'shogeg ba'ones nezek in dal dvarim lo. We saw earlier that if a person damages another person by accident, he pays for nezek, but not the other four elements. So tsar nami l'chayev. Why isn't tsar chayav for a person who damages by accident? De bahahu kra de marbina nezek sivnami tsar. The same source, the same words in the Torah, which is petza tachad petza, which tells you that we pay damages for an accident, also tells you that you pay for tsar. So how can it be that tsar is not paid for damage done by accident if accidents and tsar are both based on the same word in the Torah? V'yesh Lomar, Tosfot answers, D'chol ma d'matzina lemiftar shogeg patrinan. Tosfot answers that the Gemara is operating with a logical premise, which is that whenever we have an option, we're going to say that shogeg is chayav less, because it's really a stretch to obligate a person to pay damages for an accident. So we're going to limit it as much as possible, and therefore we're going to interpret that you pay nezek, but you don't pay the other four elements of damage. So therefore, since the main focus of the pasuk is nezek, so we're only going to obligate a person who damages by accident in nezek, but not the other elements of damage, even though tsar is a midrashic interpretation of the same exact word, v'lo b'tsar. So to recap, the Gemara is going to discuss multiple laws of shogeg in the Torah. The first is damages, where we know that nezek is chayav for damage, even for an accident, based on petah tachal patza. Daled dvarim are not obligated to be paid for a person who damages by accident. Daled dvarim, the other four elements of tsar, ripoy, shevet, and boshet are only for damage done on purpose. And then we have the case of Shabbat, where the law of Shabbat is a person who violates Shabbat by accident brings a korban, but it has to be only a particular kind of an accident where the person forgot that it was Shabbat that day or forgot that this malacha is prohibited on Shabbat. But if a person didn't know full awareness of the very action they were doing, it's not Chilul Shabbat b'shogeg, but it's not Chilul Shabbat at all, because a fundamental definition of Malacha of Shabbat is Melechet Machshevet, which is purposeful, intentional work, as opposed to plain labor. And we see that because the Torah multiple times defines the Malacha as Melechet Machshevet, at least in the case of the work for the Mishkan, which is the source for Malacha for Shabbat, as we see the words Melechet Machshevet, L'horot Natan B'libo, that they did the work with mindfulness, V'choshvei Machshavot, who were calculating, based on Chacham Leiv, and God gave Chachma B'libo to do all this work. The Torah really focuses that the work wasn't just labor, but rather mindful, calculated, wise activity, and that is the basis of Malacha for Shabbat that is prohibited. And therefore, if a person does Malacha without realizing that they're actually doing that particular creative activity, they're not even in violation of Shabbat b'shogeg. The fourth law is that if a person destroys or removes a limb of his slave, v'shichata, and destroys it, l'chavshi shalchanu tachareno, the Eved automatically goes free if the master causes the loss of a limb, such as an eye or any other limb. And the final law is the law of Ir Miklat, where a person who kills by accident, Asher Lo Tzada, that was not planned, will go to an Ir Miklat, will go to Galut for his atonement for the sin of murder by accident. On the bottom of Chavav and Beis, the Gemara teaches us Rabba's law, Zarak Kli Merosh Agag, Uba Acher V'Shibro Makel Patur. That a person who breaks a kli that was flying in midair is patur, because it was considered to be broken already. The Rashba says, Klomar Hasheni, the person who breaks it is patur. Aval Harishon Chayav, but the first person who threw it off the roof, assuming it wasn't the owner, is Chayav to pay damages to the owner, Debatar Meikara Azlinan. Because we look at the first act. Whoever threw it from the roof, if a person throws it in a way that will break the kli, it's considered to be broken the moment the person threw it off, so therefore throwing it is the act of damage and is chayav. The Raiva disagrees and says that they will both be patur. Harishon patur, the first person is patur, because even though we expect it to break, well, we never really know what would have happened. It didn't actually break as a result of his actions. V'sheni nami patur, and the second person is also patur, because since it was expected to die or break already, amina manatavira tavar, it's considered to be broken already. So the second one didn't break it because it was broken. The first one didn't break it because he didn't break it. So the Rashba thinks that the thrower would be chayav to pay damages because he rendered it broken, and the Raiva thinks that it's not actually broken in midair, and therefore the thrower is also patur. Rashi, in his commentary to the Gemara, interprets that Zarak Bala Kli Merosh Agag, interprets the scenario of the Gemara that it was the owner of the Kli who threw the Kli from the roof. Why does Rashi have to say that? Why is that relevant if we're talking only about the second person being patur? Perhaps the reason is because Rashi thinks that if it wasn't the Bala Kli, we should have mentioned the fact that the thrower would be chayav if perhaps Rashi agrees with the view of the Rashba, that the Rishon would be chayav, and the reason why the Gemara didn't mention it is because Rashi is saying that the owner happens to be the thrower in the scenario of the Gemara. The Shulchan Aruch's psak on this sugya, Kaimalon ki Rabbi Meir de Dain Dina de Garmi. We paskin like Rabbi Meir, who says you're chayav for Garmi for indirect damage. It's important to note that Tosot says that Zarakli Merosh Agag Rabba Garsinan, in the sugya of Kadam Vasilko, when the pillows were removed, Pirush of Alphas, the Rabba Latame, the Les Ledina de Garmi. The Rif says that Rabba, who exempts the person who removes the pillows, is Rabba's unique opinion that Garmi is not chayav. And the Re says that this is grama, more indirect, and is patur l'kulei alma. And this is important because of the fact that the Shulchan Aruch paskins that Garmi is chayav, and that means that Sarev Shtar Chov Shel Chavero Chayav L'Shalem Kol HaChov Shayav Shtar. That if a person burns his friend's document, which is his only piece of evidence to a debt that he's owed, he's chayav damages, even though the shtar doesn't really have the value. But it causes the loss of money. So Garmi, which is basically direct cause, but not direct damage, is chayav according to Reb Meir, which is how we paskin. And because of that, the Shulchan Aruch says, so Reikli Shalom Merosh Agag, Vayutach Karim Yipol Ayam Lo Yishaber, V'Kadam Acher V'Silkan, V'Nechbar HaKli Ba'arz V'Nishbar, that if a person moved the pillows and it broke, Chayav HaMesalek, the person who removed it is Chayav. V'chein Kol Kuyatei Bazet. In other words, the Shulchan Aruch follows the Rif, that this is a case of Garmi. And Rabbah is a minority view, which says that Garmi is Patur, but we paskin Garmi is Chayav. And the Ramah in the Shulchan Aruch says, Yesh Omrim Dezeh Mikre Grama, that Yesh Omrim, some people say, namely the Ri and Tosfot, that this is Grama and it's Patur L'chul Yalma, and Rabbah is not a minority view, but is a majority view that we follow, that you're Patur. The Shach in Shulchan Aruch says about this halacha that Zarak Kli Nirat li dezem mari shelo higbiu kli rak techafo min hagag la'aretz. The Shach says that the scenario must be that he didn't throw the kli, but he shoved it to the ground. Aval higbiu, because if he would have lifted it up, migzal gazle, then he would be a gazlan. Hashava bay me'eved v'chayav, and he would be chayav to give it back. In other words, there's no way to exempt the person who threw the kli off the roof, because even if it does not chayav based on the laws of Nezikin, he's a ganav. He lifted it up, he did an act of geneva, and he's chayav. Even if it broke by mistake, even if it broke out of without his control, certainly if he threw it off. So the Shach says he didn't do a kinyan geneva, and therefore the laws of geneva don't apply, only the laws of Nezikin. But the Chazon Ish disagrees, because he says, Mistimal Lashon HaGemara mashma shemedubar kan be'ofen shegbio. the language of the Gemara implies that he lifted it up. Sharei stam zrika al dehagba. Zrika, if you throw something, the assumption is you picked it up. V'tam she'ino nechshav gazlan hu mishum shekevan shaya sham karm ksasot lo yasofal avol lidei shvira. The reason why he's not considered to be a gazlan is because he didn't intend to take ownership, and the action isn't necessarily an act of nezek because he threw it towards the pillows. Just lifting up an item that belongs to somebody else is not an act of gzela. That's what the Shach said. But the Chazon Ish says that lifting something else that belongs to somebody else without an intention to stealing it is not an act of stealing. When he lifted it up, the thought was he'd return it. And even though in the end he didn't return it, he actually threw it at pillows and then removed the pillows. But that's an act of damage, not an act of stealing. So we can't look at it as Geneva, because the moment of Geneva would be the act of lifting it up. At the moment he lifted it up, he wasn't going to break it, and therefore it wasn't an act of stealing. It's only an act of damage, and therefore we look at it through the lens of Nezikin, and then we have to say, well, is this grama or garmi or direct damage? And Rabbah thinks he's not chayav as a mazik, and he's also not chayav as a ganav. So the Chazon Ish disagrees with the ruling of the Shach.